Now we are broadcasting. There it is. Let's hide that window. Okay. So let me, what we're going to talk about today is ORMs. We mentioned them, I mentioned them a little bit last week when we first started talking about SQL. Basically, an ORM stands for Object Relational Mapper. So we've been talking about relational databases. So we have been modeling ideas like employees and departments, etc., as a table, and then those things have attributes, right? If we think of those as objects, we can have classes in our code that refer to those tables and have relationships to each other. And then we don't have to write the SQL statements directly. We can do things like employee.find or employee.new, and then save it and have it insert stuff into the database and load stuff out of the database. But we just write almost English-like code.
Are you talking about that in Ruby or in Terminal?
In Ruby. Mm-hmm. Well, in Ruby, but we will still be writing a console-based app, so we'll interact with it in the terminal, but we're going to write Ruby code. So similar to the thing we started writing last week, or that I kind of was demoing at the end of class, where I made that little employee listing thing, but I was writing all the SQL statements in there. Instead, I'm going to have a class that models something. So today we're going to build a board game library. So we're going to have a table called games. Eventually, we might have a table called players, and then we'll let those players rate the games, right? Or maybe mark their favorite games, right? And that'll be a many-to-many relationship. So we'll figure out another like one-to-many relationship to start with. That'll be a little easier, maybe like game designers. So a game can have a designer, and you can see all the designers, different games. Yeah, we'll do that. So the way in Rails, when you generate a new Rails project, it gives you all this code and the whole Rails library, everything up front. But we're not going to dive into Rails just yet. We're going to use a piece of Rails called Active Record. Active Record is the ORM that is part of Rails. Rails is composed of a whole bunch of little libraries, and then all together they make up what they call a framework, right? React is really just a library. React doesn't necessarily tell you how to build and organize your app. It just gives you a tool for building interfaces. It's a very powerful tool, so a lot of times you don't need a whole framework when you use React. But a framework is really more, gives you more structure, right? So Rails is a framework. Active Record is a library that's in that framework, and it specifically is just for doing ORMs. It's for writing classes in plain Ruby that map back to a database, and then you can interact with them with Ruby code.
Rails have nothing to do with SQL.
Rails has a lot to do with SQL.
Oh yeah, it's not SQL. Rails. I completely forgot about Rails. We're talking about Ruby. Yeah, I was just thinking.
Ruby is just a programming language.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I just all this SQL that we're doing. I was just. One of the reasons thinking that was the Rails part. So
yes.
It's not SQL's its own.
SQL is its own thing. Rails uses SQL, but it's a small part of it. There's a whole lot more to Rails. So we're going to inch our way in that direction. Let's hide that. Don't want to see that. Okay, cool. So I'm going to make a little gist on GitHub that's got some files in it that I'm going to have us start with, and I'm not signed into GitHub here. Maybe I'm signed in over here. Okay. So we need a gem file. And I'm going to make these available. Once I'm done adding these files, I'm going to post this. So I'm going to link it to you, and y'all can get it. Yeah. So This file, I want you to just ignore for now because it has a bunch of stuff that is normally built into Rails. And if you look at it now, it's just going to be confusing. But we need it. So ignore that. Got that. Do that. Cop.yaml. We're going to start linting our code today. This.
Can you run code from a guest, or is it just kind of like a notepad for
Notepad? Yeah. So I'm going to make their dash p db slash migrate their fig. Actually, probably just do this all on one line like that, Okay. Make it public. That's fine. Oh, you can't have subdirectories. All right. So where I've got a hyphen, I want you to. There we go. Okay. We'll drop this in Slack. Oh, it's just so noisy right now. Where were we? The 2 and 3 of us. There we go. I think that all worked live on YouTube. Okay. So I slacked you all that link, and I'm going to walk us through. When you remove, let's see, get to move bglib to bglib reference. Okay, so I'll go to that link that, that I gave you, and you're going to use that to do some copy pasting and follow along.
Oh, okay.
Or link and copy paste to.
You just open it up in your browser.
Okay, just.
Yep. We're going to be referring back to that while we set up this project. So like I said, normally once we get into Rails, you'll say Rails new, and it'll generate most of the stuff for us. And then all the code that's in that rake file is actually like buried deep in Rails. This lets us get started using Active Record outside of Rails, and we're going to set up some of the parts. So then when we see Rails, the way Rails is set up, this is set up just like Rails is set up, but it's only a piece of it.
It's a little piece of the puzzle.
Yep. So let's make a directory. Let me bop this up a little bigger so you can see. Make a directory. We're going to call it bglib for board game library.
You want us to follow along?
Yep. Change in there. If we go over here to the README that I made, that's the second file in the link I gave you all. Copy that make directory command and then go ahead and run it.
That have to be done.
Yes, if you do it plus, you should
have
have
three
three
directories.
directories.
STG, so I should get into that.
If that's where you want to keep it.
Week 9.
Yeah, wherever you want to keep it.
Should be making a second.
config and database.
Yep.
I need to make directory 9. Monday. No, I made the directory
It's
9,
unlisted.
and then I made a new directory Monday, but that created and all the directory are in an outside directory. Now I mean the directory week 9.
We understand Monday.
I made the
I forgot all of this.
Monday.
Oh my gosh.
Now I'm in CD Monday.
Seems like forever ago.
Now. Make the
So we're doing
Monday,
the capstone project, or at least try it. I was doing all the CSS and the SAS.
Mhm.
I watched a bunch of videos on it. Pretty cool. Just could not get it to work.
So I have those two in there,
Yeah.
and you want to do them, one of them are.
Nope. That's it. Just wanted those directories to exist.
Three in there.
3.
Two, DB3.
Yep. So go ahead and open up that directory in your editor. So if you're in VS Code, code dot. And we're going to make a new file called a gem file. And then scroll down in the reference I gave you, find the gem file and copy those 6 lines and paste them into the gem file. And then we'll talk about what they are.
Now the gem file, do I have to put it anywhere?
Just right in the root, like right there in DGlib. So
here?
right there, yeah,
That's
that one.
file.
Yep.
No, I
Capital GEN, a file.
I think I opened something different. Come on.
You're good.
Sorry,
Right,
Senator.
yeah, right there in that
I thought
Monday
you saved a
directory.
folder here. Look.
gem file.
So what a gem file does is when you have a Ruby project and it has dependencies, we list them in the gem file. This is very much like the package.json in our Create React app, where it lists all the dependencies, the JavaScript dependencies.
This is, oh, okay, this is
the Ruby equivalent of that. So this is a list of the dependencies. So we are going to use 2 gems, Active Record, which I already mentioned, and PG, which is the Postgres driver for Ruby. So it's how Ruby is able to talk to Postgres. So those are because Active Record supports a number of different databases: SQLite, MySQL, SQL Server, maybe Oracle, but I think they dropped that. But then I think somebody else picked it up. I don't know. So there's a whole bunch
so
of
it does all that.
So the gem file is going to be gemfile.rb.
Nope, just gem file. Can you see the screen? Okay.
Yeah, but I created here.
Yeah, but not
folder.
yeah, and then not in the DP directory.
I know. There's 2 little icons.
Okay, here's my data. All right, so create a new file, not in the,
No, in the root directory, right next to those other 3 directories we made.
so in the app.
Yep, right in, yeah. No, not an app. No.
No, not in one of those. In the next to all those. So click on the parent. Monday. Just click on Monday, I guess. Don't select one
Oh,
of
I
those.
see.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and then you want to make a new file right next to all those.
It automatically saves those as Ruby. That's why I was wondering, because yours had a different thing. I saved this one.
Yeah, your editor
But
probably.
that's still in the config file.
Just drag it out.
Yeah, drag it out. I don't. Sometimes
Monday?
or I just grab it underneath the database. Okay, go. Oh shit, you're going in.
That's not right?
I know, it doesn't want to slide in the.
There we
No, it's not. Database.
Bitch.
I know, that's.
Because I had to put it on Monday.
Okay. It's in the right place now. Oh, just looks like it's inside of it.
Oh, yeah, that does look.
Yeah, it's
Not
okay.
inside.
It's good. We're good. Save that. Save that. Okay, cool. All right. So now if we go back to terminal and we run bundle install, 2 words, you should see something that looks like this. If you don't, LE. So
Oh,
EL.
whoops. I got an error message saying.
Command not found bundle.
Yeah, command not found.
Perfect. Gem install bundler. Gem with an M.
Oh, Jen.
Bundler.
Mm-hmm.
Here, unless I misspelled something.
Bundle with an R at the end.
That's what I got you.
Oh, that's the wrong version of Ruby. Did we not set up our RBN right? Oh yeah, we're on the wrong version of Ruby. Code stuffs. So sharp C.
How much 2.27?
Yeah. Okay. RBN sharp C. That. Right. Alright. Yeah, there we go. So now, if I close this tab, open it, oops, full screen. Yeah, the font bumped up. Yes. And Ruby dash V. Perfect. Okay, so go ahead and change directories back into your project. Actually, I'm gonna Slack him your. Okay. Okay. So take that, copy that, and then open up your ZSHRC. There we go. Now, I've installed bundler.
Well, so I need to get, do I need to start a new VS code, or is it gonna?
It should be fine. Gem install bundler. So hit the up arrow a few times. Boom, 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 boom. There it was.
There it is. That
That didn't say it was in a keystroke.
one.
Cool.
Installer.
Perfect. So now you can bundle install. Let's go ahead. Oh, is there Rubocop for Rubocop VS Code?
Bundle install and not command.
Yeah. After you did you do the with the did you get it? Oh, okay.
So that's it. Enters. Oh boy, I don't feel like figuring out how we're gonna do Rubocop and VS Code today. We'll do that later. Okay.
So right inside this bundle install.
Yep, so you got bundle install, right? And installed, showed you some output that looks like mine here. Close to it. Yep, beautiful.
Mine's been.
Okay. Okay. So once we have,
Jam's not installed.
yep. So once we have that, also let's take this console. So bin/console. Make a new file in the bin directory called console. Oh, I didn't make a bin directory. Make a bin directory in your project. And a file in there called console. No extension. Let's see.
Which file does it need?
Make a folder here. Yeah, bin, bin. Caps lock. Just lowercase. Do it all lowercase.
Do it all.
Yeah. Yep.
Just bin.
Just bin. And then inside of there, make a new file called console. Yep. Enter.
Okay.
Cool. And then go over to the gist. And in the gist, that's it. Bin dash, does a bin dash go up to the top maybe more? No, maybe, there it is. Copy that, 16 lines. Copy that into that file and save it. Okay, and over in terminal now, type chmod +x bin/console. One word, see what
You got a chart, bin
that's
folder,
exactly it.
and then console in there.
Yep.
Oh, bin. Chmod +x.
Cool. That's it. So now you can type /bin console, and it'll, well, you got one more step. In the DB folder, make a new file called config.yaml. What did you say, Dino?
It says no file directory called bin.
dot slash.
Slash, sorry. chmod plus x bin dash
Slash.
slash console.
Yep.
And it gave me no such file or directory.
Okay. Over here. Oh, you made your bin folder inside. There it is.
And then we're supposed to make a file inside of DB.
Yeah, file inside of DB, so right next to migrate, called config.yml. And this should be the last part. of this.
M.yml.
Yep,
It's YML.
YAML.
I've never heard of it.
It's kind of like JSON.
Oh, okay. It's back end stuff.
Rails uses it a lot.
And what is in there? That.
Yep,
And you got that from.
from the gist. Yeah, there's a db-config.yaml file. There it is.
You should look like that with the. Sorry,
Oh,
it's
the
okay.
thing was empty.
Yep, I just finished. I'm glad.
Okay, so this is the stuff, this is part of the stuff that Rails generates for you when you generate a new project. What we have is a configuration for our database. That's the db config.yaml. What we have is a console command that we can just type bin console now, and it'll give us a terminal interface with any of the models we create will get automatically loaded. If we type reload bang in there, it'll reload any changes we make to our models while we're working. And that may not be as perfect as Rails is. Mine's pretty naive, so we might soft eggs out and go back in a little bit. But
You're not gonna have to do this every time you make a new Rails project.
no. Rails, you just say Rails new. I'm just walking us through this because today and tomorrow we're not going to do. I think Wednesday we're going to do our first Rails app. So this is just manually setting up part of what you'll see.
This is kind of what, when you did a Rails, it would do this for you. This
And
is
you
just-
would, in fact, if I go show you a Rails app, you'll see an app folder, a bin folder, a config folder, a DB folder with the same stuff in it, and there'll be more stuff too. But this is the stuff that's
Keeps you
important
up running fast.
to active record. Yeah. So I just want to show you active record today, not all of Rails. So what we have is the database configuration, the console script. We have a folder for our models to go in, and oh, I guess I didn't need to make a config folder. Oh, I meant to make a bin folder. Okay, so you can delete that config folder.
App model, oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah. So,
Which one do we need to?
oh wait, maybe it's config db.yaml. Wait, did I? Oh no, it's fine. Database.yaml. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I named that file wrong. We do need the config folder. So new folder. Move the config.yaml. It's actually called database.yaml. My bad. Knew that, but something was off there. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So use this config?
yeah. So move that file in there and then rename it to database.yaml. Not yet. Whoops,
I
you're
have
on the- you selected the
a file
wrong thing.
config and I have config that line on it.
Yeah. Yes, and then rename that. That was my mistake. Rename
Oh,
this
as a YAML.
to database. Database. In Rails, we keep all the configuration folders and that configuration files in that config folder. Yep, there we go. Okay, so now let's go and do /bin/console, and what it should do is give you an IRB prompt. It looks like what I've got on the screen.
Let's see.
So /bin/console.
Just like that?
Mm-hmm.
The permission denied.
Oh, did you do the chmod? Oh, when you copied did you get the first line? Go to your editor. Go to your console file. Delete that line.
This whole line?
The blank line.
Oh.
Yes, go. There you go. Yeah, that has to be the first line in the file.
How do I get down this?
Yours did
Look like that. Yeah.
Why is that permission denied?
you didn't do this. We must not have done the CH mod, right?
Okay, that's where I'm supposed to.
Oh, you did a big X. Little X.
Yeah.
There it is.
Cool. There.
So now we have an IRB prompt here, but there's nothing. We don't have any models yet, right? So let's go ahead and back out of here. So type exit and hit enter. But it works. Basically, what that script did is it connected to our database, and that's it for now. So we know that that's working. So in Ruby, did we make the rake file? Or no, I don't think we did. So in the root, right next to your gem file, make a new file called rake file.
In the compute file?
No, in the root. So it'll be right next to your gem file. Yeah, so new file right there. Why does it always want to do that?
Yeah.
Well, you can drag it out, I guess.
Okay, what's it called?
Rake file, capital R. File.
Oh. Dot file or?
Nope, just file. It's weird. Yeah, that's it. Enter, and then drag it. Enter. I drag it down. There you go. Yeah, and then say yes to move it. There you go.
It is so hard in here to.
Or just go in terminal, just say touch rake file.
So I should,
That's what I
should.
Yeah, go to terminal and just type touch rake file. Yeah,
Touch.
yeah. And then copy this big old file from the gist. It's the last one. It's 78 lines.
Throw so much usual.
Yeah, I know. I should have touch is.
Okay, so you got that, Dino?
Yeah.
The rake file? Okay, so go back to terminal and type rake space dash capital T.
Capital R, or is it
Nope, lowercase.
space?
Capital dash capital T. Oh, that's okay. Let's add rake to our bundle. So go over here and add gem rake to our gem file. Yeah. Really, let's keep it inactive. Let's keep it in alphabetical order for now.
To the bottom. Gem
Space string rake. And then we can just run bundle. So you can type bundle install, or if you just leave off the install, it assumes you mean to install. So you can really just type bundle. Yeah, just bundle. That does a bundle install. So there, see green is rake is green, it's all rake.
Oh, so it went into that file and said, I need this, went out and
Yep.
pulled it down.
Yep. Now, rake dash T. Cool. So that rake file, those 78 lines that we pasted in, that file defines these tasks. These are things that we can run on the command line to do things with our database. We can create a database, drop a database. We can run migrations on the database. We can reset it. We can roll back the migrations. We'll talk about migrations in a minute. We can create a schema from the database, and it saves basically the schema of the database. Rather than saving it in SQL, it saves it in Ruby. And then because it's written in Ruby and not PostgreSQL or MySQL, Active Record can create a new database from that schema, which is pretty cool. And then we can generate migrations. So migrations are new. This is something that we haven't talked about yet. So we can generate a new migration, and then we can run them, and we can roll them back. What migrations do is they allow us to define incremental changes to a database over time. So like, I just want to add a column to this one table. I want to create a new table. You write that in Ruby, run the migration. It goes and generates the SQL and executes it on the database. And then you have a list of all the changes that you've made to the database over time, which is very helpful for people coming in to work on the project and stuff like that. It also gives you a very structured way of saying, this is the current version of the database. It's at this version. Your copy of the database is at this version. So in order to get my changes in your copy, you have to run these migrations.
So it's almost like you're in VS Code doing the commits. You type a little line, and so that's a history.
Very similar to like version control for database, yeah. It's not as good at controlling the version, but it's the way this shit used to be before somebody invented migrations was a nightmare. Like you had a production database and you're working locally and you're like, I'm gonna add these columns, add these columns. Okay, now we need to get the database administrator to add these columns to the production database, and they'd have to go do them manually. But then they'd get it wrong. You're like, no, that was supposed to be a decimal column, not an integer column. It was really bad.
Go back and redo it.
Yeah, which is dangerous in a production database. But now we have tools where we can programmatically define what the changes are going to be.
And then you can roll back to.
Yes, rollback will actually undo those changes. So let's run rake db create. And this is where you find out if Postgres is running or not on your computer.
So if you're working for a company,
db : create, just like that. Yeah.
So they have, I don't know, a page that has over 1 million things on it. And you're working on it. I kind of got into last week. I don't know how I did. I just start closing the tabs, and one of them gave me warnings like, "Are you sure you want to terminate the?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm assuming it was something with Yarn serve or something he was running."
Nothing you closed would have deleted your database. So your database you just aren't finding it where it is.
Yeah.
That's
Your
all.
brother just thought it was weird. I'm like, like I said, I was still out of it. I'm on medication. I'm just like, you know what? I'm just gonna leave it. I mean, I just recreated.
Rake, sorry, not run. Did I say run and rake? Rake db create. Yeah, rake space db : create.
My database was created, but is there a name to it?
It is. The name came from the config/database.yaml. The name is bg_library. That is the name of the database. So we're gonna rake db create. Oops, already exists for me. I'm actually gonna drop mine so that we can start from scratch because this is what I was doing over there this morning. Okay, cool. So I've got an empty database now. And in case you want to drop your database, that would be it. Yeah. And if I look at what the reset task does, I bet the reset task calls drop, it calls create, then it calls migrate. That's what in one you do rake db reset. It'll drop your database, create the new one, and run your migrations over
so
again.
it does it right there because that code tells it to.
Yeah. So if we were to try to run db migrate now, it migrated. But what did it migrate? There was nothing. We didn't have any migrations yet. But what it did do was over here. Let me refresh this. How do I? There used to be a way to reload. There it is. There's a file here that wasn't there before. Schema.rb. So every time I migrate, it dumps the schema, which is basically a Ruby written version of my database, which has nothing in it, right? It just says enable Postgres, right? These, that's it. Okay. So how do we make a new migration? well, this rake file has something in there called rake g migrate. Let me give it the name of the migration. So we're creating a board game library. So we're going to create a table called games. So I'm just going to name my migration create games. Well, migration, not migrate. Cool. So it made a file with the timestamp. It does the timestamp to keep them in order, right? Create games. So if I go look in this migrate folder, I have a migration called create games. And there's two methods here, up and down. So this up is the method that's going to run when you might do your migration. And if you do a rollback, it's going to run the down method. So what you do is you write something in here that changes the database, and then in down, you write how you change it back. So what's cool is in Ruby, we can just say create table games to T. This is, remember we talked about the do-in blocks, and the block can yield something to kind of like each. If this was each, it would yield, and then T would be each thing. In this case, create table is yielding us a block. T is the table that we're creating. So what columns do we want to add to it? I want to add string column called name. I want to add maybe a text column called description. And then how about an integer column for minimum players, and an integer for maximum players, right? So if it's a game for 2 to 4 players, it'd be 2 and 4.
When you do integer, you don't have to put a semicolon.
I do. That was my mistake. Yeah. How about a t dot? Let me peek. Yeah, you can do Boolean, but I wanna. Oh, did I delete it? Must have deleted it. Out of migration. Oh, there we go.
That sounds cool. And schema. I'm gonna name my kid that Boolean schema Rivera.
Here's a
falsy or a true?
Here's a duration for the game. So 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever. So we'll have a duration in minutes. And then maybe
different color. That's because that's a function.
These are in different colors because I used some really funky syntax highlighting for my editor.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Oh, actually, they are on.
Yes. Yeah.
And that kind of, it looks like the first 3 that you wrote was like in a purplish.
What it is every time I use the word integer, it's green. Every time I use the word, like if I were to write age recommendation again, it would be blue again, just like that was blue.
Gotcha.
And you see if I change, it changes colors. So every time the same word appears, it's always a different color.
Easy to pick up later.
Yeah. So the down migration is just going to be drop table games, right? Because in the one I'm creating the table, if I would go back the other way, we're just going to drop the table. Okay? So let's go back over here. Rake db migrate. There it is. So So created the table. That's how long it took, and now it's done. That was it. So let's go look at the schema. Oh, look, there's the schema, just like I typed over in my file, but it generated this for me. This file, the schema file, you never edit yourself. If you want to make a change to it, you make a new migration that describes that change, and then run the migrations, and this file will get regenerated after the changes are made. So let's use our, what was it called, Table Plus, and let's take a look at that database. Sure, let's update real fast. So let's create a new connection. Let's relaunch first. Oh, there we go. Okay. So Postgres, And the database was called BG Library. Okay, so there's 3 tables in here. AR, internal metadata, ignore that. That's active record keeping track of some stuff for itself. It's internal metadata. We don't need to worry about it. Schema migrations. This table is literally just a list of every migration that's been run against this database.
Okay, so it'll just go.
Yeah, so as we make more migrations, if we look at that timestamp is going to match the migration that we ran when we, there it is right there, see it ends in 1058.
Does that add a file each time, or is it just added to that file?
When you generate a new migration, it makes a new file, and when you run them, it adds them to this database here. Oh. So now the database is aware of which migrations have been run, basically. And now here's games. Here's the table that we created. There it is. And check it out. The primary key ID, it created for us. It just assumed, why would you create something without a primary key? So we can tell it to skip the primary key, but if we just don't tell it anything, it's the convention. Remember, with Rails, it's a lot of convention over configuration. It assumes we at least want an ID.
If 99.9% of the time you're going to need a primary key, when would you not use a primary key?
Certain join tables wouldn't have one. Like if you had a table that was literally just the 2 join IDs, you wouldn't need, they don't need primary keys.
I see, when you do the domain.
It's literally just an ID from that one, ID from that one. This thing in the middle doesn't need its own ID. Now, if you wanted to, if that join table was its own model of its own, which say we have users or players, and then there's games, and each player can rate the game, right? Or mark it a favorite. Well, that rating or favoriting is its own model. It's its own idea, so we'd probably give that an ID and give it its own model. But there are cases where you would just do a many-to-many, where it would just be like user has many games and games have many users, but there's no intermediate model. That would exist in the database as a join table that didn't have an ID. I forgot to show off a feature here, so I'm actually going to show off rolling back. If I say roll back, so that migration was reverted. If we go over here and we refresh, we see that the games table is gone. So something I forgot to do was add t.timestamps. I think maybe it's underscored. Let me go with underscored, and we'll see if I'm wrong when we run the migration and it says undefined method. Undefined method timestamps. All right. I was right the first time. Okay. So let's take a look. We refresh this, games. Here we go. The name, the description, things, and look at created at and updated at. It automatically added those columns. All I said was timestamps. What's really cool is that Rails is now going to automatically fill those in every time I create the new record. And then every time I change the record, updated that will get updated at. So there's just like files have the timestamps on them. Active Record's going to do this automatically for all of rows in our database. Not in the database itself. Like if we were to go in here and write SQL queries, those wouldn't happen. But as long as we're using it from the Ruby side, it'll just happen automatically. So I'm going to go here to App Models. I'm going to create a new file called game.rb. Notice that this is the singular version, the singular word of our table name, which is plural. So we're going to say class game. The game is an active record base. Okay, so the game class inherits from active record base. This is like in React, how when we create a new component of our own, it inherits from React.component. So there's some behavior that this class is going to have automatically on its own, and then we can extend that to do stuff that's specific to games. So let's see what we can get already just from having this. So I'm gonna say ./bin console. I'm in my console, take game. Oh, well, I have my game class, it's available to me. So let's say G equals game.new. Huh, there's an object, everything's nil. So let's go ahead and fill out those attributes. Okay, let's cheat a little bit. Let's go over here to Board Game Geek and let's use Root, which is the top game on the hot list right now. So Root just came out in 2018. So Root, so the name is Root. Let's get the description.
Could you do all in one line?
Like the.
Like a game.name equals root, comma, game.
I could do it when I did the new. I could pass in a hash that had all these as key values. Yeah. So I'm gonna borrow that sentence from there. Min players is 2. Max players is I think 4, right? Yeah. Ooh. What? Oh, did I really call it player instead of players? Oh gosh. So in the real world, yeah, player instead of players. In the real world, I would go, you know what, this is the real world. Let's say this shit was in production, right? So we can't just go edit this migration, run the migration again. We have to actually change the database. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna exit out of here. Rails G migration. Add fix games. Describing what it is that this migration does, right? So in the up migration, I am going to change rename column Rails migration. The edge Rails. Here we go. .2. Jeez, come on. I want 3.2. 5. There we go. Migrations. Here's the documentation for migrations. Okay. So create so all the different things. Remove column. I think there's a rename. Yes, T dot. Change table. Cool. Let's use change table. So change table games. We want to rename max player to max players. And then I'm going to also rename the duration to min duration. And then T dot integer max duration. I'm gonna add them. So I added a duration column where you just put like 90 minutes and realized that games really usually have a like 60 to 90 minutes, it's a range. So I'm gonna rename it to duration, the min duration, and then I'm gonna add a column for max duration. Then let's go to our down method here. Actually, this might be a good opportunity to show you another feature of active record. So we define these up and down methods. For a lot of migrations, like you can look at that and you can know what the reverse of that would be, right? So this didn't always exist in Rails, but a feature that they added at some point was the ability to just define a change method. And it would automatically, from what you wrote here, know what the up and the down would be to do the rollback. So this is helpful because now I don't have to waste my time writing a rollback. I can just write up. So break AB migrate. I changed my column. If we go look at the schema now, we have min players, min duration, max duration, right? It added that column to the end. If we go over here and refresh, there it is. And then everything is hunky-dory now. So let's go back into our console. Let's do this. It's new. The name is root. The description is that. The min players is that. The max players is 4. The min duration was 60, I think, right? The max duration 90. Oh, and the age is $10.
The min and max duration. That's a function of the schema.
No, I just named the column that. It's just an extra column.
That's a comment.
And for age recommendation, we're with the minimum age requirement, which is 10. So this is where it gets cool, right? I can look at my game. That's just an object. We've seen what objects look like in the Ruby console when they have the attributes. Remember the little @ instance variables? So what's neat is I said game.new, and it already had these. Rails looked at the database, looked at the columns on the database, and automatically generated attributes on this model with the column names, right? I'm leaving created at and updated at nil. I'm also leaving the ID nil. What I'm just going to do here is say g.save. True. Okay, cool. Let's look at G again. Oh, look, I have the ID 1, and now my timestamps are filled in. Let's go look at the database. Refresh. There it is. So it made our database there for us.
That's pretty cool.
Right? Let's add a couple more games real quick, and I'm going to find let's write a faster way to do those. I'm going to make a new file here. Call it seeds.rb. This is a thing within Rails. It's not built into our version yet, but if you just write some Ruby code in here to like create some stuff, it's cool. So I can do game.create, and I can pass it an array, I think, of objects. So what were the fields we had? We had name, description, min players, let's do this, max players, min duration, max duration, and age requirement.
The max, you want to leave them at 0 or not?
I'm just going to copy and paste this a couple of times as we fill this out so that we're going to quickly fill in a couple of games. So how about another, how about blood rage? 2 to 4, 60 to 90, 14. Okay. So blood rage. The description, that's a good description. 2 to 4. Actually, I happen to know that there's a 5th player expansion, so I'm going to put 5. I own it. 60, 90, and this was 14. So I'm going to get another game from the same designer so that when we add the designer thing, that we can.
These are all PC games?
No, these are board games.
Board games, actually.
Oh, that's a board game. Oh,
Yeah.
I think they're fine stuff. All ages there at that site?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you find something.
Copy this description. So min players is free. Good. I was going to say you can't play this with. Actually, makes sense. 90 to 120 minutes. Age requirement 14. Let's get two more games in here. How about, oh, I know. Started playing this with my family last night. Butterstone 6. Let's use this description. 1 to 6. Duration is like 60 minutes, right? 45 to 75, it says. 25, age requirements by like 14. Let's get another game from Jamie Stegmeyer. How about viticulture? Okay. Description there. 2 to 6, 90 minutes, 13 plus. So 2 to 6, 90, 90, and 13. There we go. Nice little budding game collection. I'm going to copy this. Normally, in Rails app, we will just on DBC to just run this file. But I'm going to paste the age, actually age requirement. What did we call it? Age recommendation.
Yeah, how'd you do all of them at once?
Adam Fu.
Boo.
Adam.
Yeah, visual code, that's something I can figure out. It does it somewhere.
I'll find it.
Yeah.
So
I did that the other day.
check this out. So let me clear my console. I don't know why I exited out here. Clear the screen.
We call it bang. We go bang.
Yeah. So I pasted those in. I saved them. Game.all. Ooh, there's that, right? That's cool. There's all the games. What if I say .map, you know, just like in JavaScript, m.name. Ah, cool. So I can map over them.
What was the inside the what do you call
A block. So the verticals, goalposts. This is me naming, let's call it game. So I'm getting all the games, which I get an array of all this stuff, right? And then I'm mapping over them, and I'm returning just the name. So I end up with just a list of games, right? So game.all. How about game.find with the ID 1, game.find the ID 2. So this is how we get stuff. This is select star from games where ID equals 1. We just say find.
So you don't have to find the ID yourself. You just type in.
No.
Cool.
How about this? Game.where. Let's say we want a game for at least 5 players, right? Game.where. Max players. I think because it's a greater than less than, I have to actually write the fragment. Max players greater than or equal to 5. Thanks. 4 games came back. Right? So what if I map? I'm going to show you some shorthand here for mapping by the thing I wrote curly braces and the thing. Ignore this. We'll talk more in detail about it later, but it's shorthand for that other thing I did. So these are the games that at least 5 people can play. What about 6 people? I think it's just going to be, I think one of them is just going to get knocked out. Yeah. How about a game that I can play with just me and my wife? Okay? So that min players is less than or equal to. So my wife and I can just play these. What about I'm home alone? I don't want to be able to play a game by myself. Well, less than or What, equal to 1, because less than or equal to 1. There's no games for 0 players. Charterstone. That's the only one of these that I can play solo. So Charterstone has a solo mode. Some games have rules for playing. It's like solitaire. You know, there's just rules and you follow them, and you're playing against the game. Charterstone has a whole rule set called Automa, where you basically play the other parts of the game automatically. There's like a deck of cards that you turn over, and it tells you what to do for the other players. So, other games do it differently. So
you would cheat on yourself.
Yeah. So here's all those things in the database. We did these. Then we get all these powerful ways to write stuff in Ruby. We're gonna take a quick break, and we come back. I'm going to add the designers table, and then we will associate designers and games together, so that we can say, I want to know all the games designed by Eric Lang, and get back just the games designed by Eric Lang, or I want to say like, give me a list of all the games and their designer's name. And then we'll do that. Take a quick break, and I'm gonna get a charger for my laptop for the battery dies.
That's all that the batteries. That's not too hard. Too damaging to the brain. Oh. Today's Ruby kids. Oh, not Ruby kids. Like Ruby land back there. My daughter's coming.
I saw that. Did you fill out the form for? There's like registration form to the campaign.
They might want.
Yeah, yes, I remember seeing your name.
I probably did it for my phone and just you know, you're going fast. You just look for that check mark.
That's kind of what I was wondering. So a lot of the folks didn't fill it out, and I'm wondering, and that would be a way. I have some.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That
I wonder if you think it's right for the lineup.
well, yeah.
Like force that stuff.
Yeah, I don't think you guys started. You need too much. Yeah.
How many are coming? Like, plus, it's not a public event, right? Oh, really? That many kids?
Sometimes they don't all show up, but like, what we have registered.
My daughter's excited. She's my shooter.
That's fun. You just lost Roblox for the week.
Roblox, yeah, Roblox and Minecraft.
I fucking hate Roblox.
Oh my gosh, she on Minecraft as well.
Roblox, no, I hate Roblox.
Yeah, it's so awful.
Oh,
What clause is,
People might know. They might know. I just looking at it.
What's that?
You know,
Oh, this is the
I'm
worst.
sitting there like, I'm picking my nose, I'm just like,
Yeah, I know.
there's something in here, just bothering me.
All right. Let's add a new model. So let's Rails generate a migration called designers. Oops. Break the migration. Create designers. So go over here. We got a new file, create designers. Okie dokie. Pick up. Oh, giz. Okay. Like create table designers. Do T. All of this actually, if you once we're in Rails, you won't have to type it all out manually. You're going to be able to generate a new model, and it'll automatically create the migration file for you. We know we want those timestamps, right? So let's put those timestamps in here. So the designer has a name, right? Does the designer, let's see, what if we go to like, what are the kind of, oh, maybe a URL to their website. Why not? Oh,
Yes, when
sorry.
you take the table designers do, and then it goes to 50,
Uh-huh.
you are defining what T is.
Yes. Yeah, I
So
could,
that
I
be
could,
food, could be whatever.
yep. Yeah. T is just the convention. I don't know. What else do we want to say about a designer? Maybe their company. What company do they work for?
All those have to have, goal.
They do. Thank you. Would have found out real soon. Run that migration. Oh, well, here. Let's run this migration. Cool. Go into our console, and we can say designer.create, and we can just give it a hash. Name. How to spell Jamie Stegmeier's name. We had Jamie Stegmeier. Company is Stonemeyer Games, and his URL was, he had a little blog there, didn't he? Oops. Jamie Stegmeier's website, I guess. Those were the three things we had, right? Uninitialized content designer, right? We made the game model, right, with nothing in it. We had all that functionality we had before, we got just by inheriting from Active Record Base. So let's go ahead and do the same thing. Lowercase d. And designer. So reload, boop. There we go. Created the designer there. Know that we also want Eric. Let's see, Eric Lang. Does Eric Lang have a website? We use his Twitter because I know he's pretty popular on Twitter there. A bit of all that. So just Twitter. His Twitter. I happen to know that he works for Simon Inc. Eric and Lang. Then there's one other game. I don't want to match that up with it. Actually, let's leave that one empty. Okay. So we have two designers there. Cool. So we go look over here. We have our games. We also now have our designers table, right? But we have no way to connect the designer to this. So this is in truth, games can have multiple designers. In our implementation, which is very naive so far, we're going to start off with a game has one designer. Okay? We would probably in the future make it a many-to-many, because Charterstone had, I don't know if you saw Charter, or Viticulture there had multiple designers, right? But we're just going to go with these ones. So what we need to do is make another migration and call it add designer. Okay. So we're going to go here. We'll also change this to change. We're going to say add column. I think this is it. I'm working on memory here. The games. Designer ID. Add column. What if it's a references? Reference. This is what we actually want to do. We just added the column ID. It wouldn't automatically remember the foreign keys we talked about, like adding that thing. If we write it like this, so we want to add a reference to games. We want to reference a designer as a foreign key. That's all we write. Take db migrate. So if we go look at our database now, designers didn't change, right? But games has a designer ID column now. Okay. So let's check out some of the cool stuff that we have in our models now. Well, first thing we need to do here is a game now belongs to the designer. So we have to set that up. And the designer has many games. Belongs to and has many are two methods that Active Record Base provides to us. And once we have those in place, let's get the designer here. Designer. So I could take that one, or I could take that first. So just give me the color line. Designer. Okay. So I got the first designer in the database, who was Jamie Stegmeyer. So d.games. I got back a collection property. It's empty, right? Because we haven't said that any games were designed by Jamie Stegmeyer, right? But we assigned it D, right? So we have Jamie Stegmeyer's model in the variable D. So let's get a game. Let's say game.find by name. Shutterstock. Boom. Right? That's cool. I just like find by name, and it gave me back the so G is Charterstone. So let's say G dot designer. The designer is nil, right? So let's just say the designer is D, Jamie Stegmeyer, right? And then G dot save. True. Let's go over here and look now. Let's reload this. Charterstone has this designer ID 1, which of course matches that. So we reload everything. Let's get the Charterstone back. And now let's say G.designer. What's Jamie Stegmeyer? Say, what's the designer's name? Okay. So now our game has the method designer that references back to that. Hey, Jamie Stegmeyer, what are your games? Oh, Charterstone. It's just an array with Charterstone. Okay. Let's add game dot find oops, 5. So I was looking for, right? Oops. G is game dot find 5. Viticulture. So G dot update. This is a different way of doing that. Update attribute designer be D. Oh, whoops, use a comma there. That's a symbol. True. So G has a designer now. So if we say, hey Jamie, what are your games? 2 games now, Charterstone and Viticulture, right? So let's assign last. Let's get Eric Lang. Got Eric Lang now in our D variable. So G is game dot first root. Nope, I don't want that. How about find 2? Other age. G dot there. And G is game dot find 3. Cool. So now our database of games, we have the designer IDs for both of those games, right? So Eric Lang games. So these are cool ways now that we have these methods that give us a lot of insight into our code without, we never had to write a single line of SQL here, right? Ruby was writing all the SQL. All we had to do was call methods like game.find and game.create, and then it automatically knew about the relationship between games and designers, because all I did was say has many games and belongs to designer here. It's pretty powerful. This is all the Ruby code I wrote to define these things. And now, all through my application, I can do, if I were to write more code, I could do things like create a game, create its relationship to a designer, have it all persisted in the database. And all this and those migrations is really all the code I wrote that was specific to my program. So once we get into the rest of Rails, you get to write the controllers. The controller is what maps the URL and the address bar to an action that you can take. So if I wanted to create a new game, right? I would go to game/new, and the controller would have there'd be a games controller that had a new action, and it would render a form. If I typed all the stuff into the form and hit submit, that would post to the create action. The create action would look like game.create, and then get the parameters from the form, and then render the game.show page. Game.show page would be like, okay, find the, and we redirect you to game/1, right? And so the show controller would say, okay, let me get the URL from the parameter, just like in React router, the URLs, and it would say game.find with the ID, and then render the template. And the template would just be like game.name, game.description, and list all those things out on the HTML. So the controller knows about the models and it knows about the views, right? The models don't have to know anything about any of that stuff. That's just where we write our business logic, right? So we can add a method here, like about I'll type a quick one. Oh, let's check out another feature that ORMs give us. So for a game, I think that a game should at least have a title, right? One right here. This is built into Active Record. Validates name. Presence is true. Okay, so it's going to validate the presence of name. How about we add the same thing for designer? Designer has to have a name.
Validate is a function.
It's a method built into Active Record. That's okay. Yep. I'm going to reload. Boom. Okay. So let's try to add a new game designer to d equals designer.new, right? Let's try to save this designer without filling anything out. False. Whoa. Why? What's that? So it never got saved to the database. So let's check the errors property. Ah, there's some errors here. Name can't be blank. Errors dot full message. I think you can write it out, so it'll be a sentence. Full message. Full messages. Name can't be blank. You can actually use this to show this in your form. Render back. So if somebody left it blank and it goes back in your form, you can render this property and it'll show you. You can't save it. So let's say designer.new, and then so instead of these, I've shown you we write the hash in here now. If you leave the hash off, then you can just it'll assume it's the hash. So rows.
The hash is not there.
That's how you spell his name. Yes. Okay. Uwe Rosenberg. Save. Cool. So it saves for me that time, right? So check this out. So he has no games, right? Remember before we were calling game.create? How about we call on Uwe Rosenberg d.games.create, and say he's got a game called Class Road. We don't need to specify anything else because that's the only thing that we said was required, right? So let's create that. Cool. Game ID 6. The name is Class Road. Look, designer ID is already 3. We use the games relationship to create a new game that belongs to this designer without saying game.create and then having to add the designer. It automatically knew, because I'm calling games.create on the designer object. This is what an object relational map is all about. It's all about creating these really convenient ways to work with the relationships in our data. So we go over here and we refresh. These fields were null for Glass Road, right? But the designer's already filled out. I go ahead. So is a 1 to 4, 20 to 80, 13. So 1 to 4, 20 to 80, 14, and let's get a description. Okay, how about that first sentence? Ooh, created at was supposed to be. Oh wait, no, I'm not trying to create that. I'm just trying to save that. There we go. Cool. So now we've got all the details there. Game.all. About games that they haven't listed the designer for. Game.where designer is null. Nil. Because this is Ruby, not JavaScript. There it is root. We never specified a designer for root. Right? Let's create a. Oh, there we go. How about we can chain these things together like first, right? So instead of getting an array back, I get just that game back. And then we can say the designer will create the designer. His name is Cohort. Oh, shoot. It's so now, did I not save? Ideas for. Yeah, he's on there. Oh, do I have to do that? I have to save the game. There it is. Now it says designer already saved. I don't know where. Work for the games. I have a website. Cool. So that's the introduction to Active Record ORMs. This is a whole lot easier than just writing out all that SQL.
Yeah.
Right. And if we were to, let's go here. Let's write a new little script program. Let's save a copy of copy to copy bin console to bin app. So we got this little app file here. Let's get rid of that. Actually, we need that first one. Get rid of the IRB related stuff because we don't want this to make a console. We just want to load up. This loads up all of our models. Let's ignore that fancy line. Rails will do that for you automatically. This creates our database connection. Right, so that's just some setup code. Now, what I want to do is I just want to print out every game and the designers. Right. So game.all.each do. This will yield a game. I'm going to say puts game.name designed by game.designer.name. Let's run that. And so this is Active Record. It's a whole lot better than writing all that. Just this right there is a whole lot better than writing all that SQL because there's the join happens and everything there. So in order to load the designers, all that stuff. we're good. We're done. We're done anyway. So I'm gonna turn off our streaming here. Stop broadcast.